So, April 1st, the beginning of the last push for playoffs, and it starts against Tampa Bay in their building. Technically, getting a win is all that really mattered here. Tampa was most likely making it regardless of how this game went. But if Tampa were to slip, it might mean another wildcard spot is available. The Wings had to make sure they got 2 points here if they wanted to keep the playoff chances high. The game would be a tight affair, with no team really able to get ahead the entire night. The Red Wings would find a way to get the lead very late in the third, with less than 3 minutes to go, and capped it off with an empty net. 4-2 to Detroit. Next up was the New York Rangers back at home. A tall order given their record. But even a single point here would mean a lot in the standings. While the Wings would gain the lead 3-2 halfway through the second period, New York would tie the game up and find the only goal in the third, giving them a 4-3 victory. No points for the Wings here. Then, another home game. This one against the Sabres. This game mattered. A lot. Buffalo had done well to put themselves back in the conversation, only being 3 points behind Detroit. With the way things were working out, Detroit was now out of the playoff picture, as the Islanders had come in and swept up the third in the Metro, leaving Detroit way out of the dance at this point. So a win here was important for 2 reasons. Keep pace with everyone else in the playoff picture, plus you need to deny Buffalo with the points they're looking for to try to keep them out of it. This game started quick, with Raymond finding the back of the net less than a minute in. The Wings would get 3 goals before the first half of the period was done, and then Buffalo would answer with one of their own. The first ends 3-1, and that's all the scoring we'd see in this game. Lyon would handle the 38-shot onslaught and not let another one by, which ended the game at the score the first period ended in. No points to Buffalo, and more importantly, 2 points to the Wings. We're down to 5 games remaining, 2 at home and 3 away. Because of the chaos, Detroit goes from out of the playoffs to second wild card based on the previous day's events. Pittsburgh, Washington, and Philadelphia were now the odd ones out, all tied at 83 points. And now we get to the games that are really going to be consequential. The next games for the Wings were Washington at home, away at Pittsburgh, away at Toronto, home at Montreal, and then in Montreal for their final game. The easy answer to the question, what games does Detroit need to win, is all of them. But let's think about this more critically here. Washington and Pittsburgh are no-brainers. You must win those games. If you don't, you give both Pittsburgh and Washington a huge chance at that last wild card. Those 3 teams had all played 77 games, so Detroit now has the option to simply win out. If they were to win every game, they're in. If Pittsburgh or Washington were to win either of those games against Detroit, and they won all of their games, Detroit is out. Toronto isn't a must-win per se, but as discussed before, it might as well be, given what's happening here. Same with Montreal, but they're also weaker, so you can somewhat expect wins there. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. We've got the Capitals versus Red Wings in Detroit's second to last home game of the season. Remember, this is a must-win scenario for all intents and purposes. Plus, Washington was on a 0-4-2 skid for their last 6 games. The Wings definitely showed urgency as the game got underway. Quick chances for both teams, but a bit of puck luck for both teams meant no scoring as both goalies held strong between the 25 shots faced between the 2 of them. No penalties either. You think they know what's at stake here? The first half of the second period was busy for the Wings, but still couldn't solve Lindgren. And as the period went on, momentum shifted over to Washington. Kane gets a penalty halfway through the middle frame, but no goal means we're still scoreless with a few minutes left in the period. With 2:20 left, a failed clear by Detroit allowed Strome to take the shot and find the back of the net for the game's first scoring, making it 1-0. A few minutes later, the Wings failed to get the puck up the ice, and as it goes the other way, Ovechkin takes the puck up and snaps it in, giving the Capitals a 2-goal lead with 8 seconds left in the second. All of a sudden, the Wings were at risk of losing this critical game, with only 20 minutes left to find a way to get 2 goals. Even an overtime loss would be okay at this point. It would at least throw an extra point in the standings and keep Detroit a bit more ahead compared to the other teams. With that in mind, Detroit would get plenty of chances, including a close breakaway for Larkin and a pinball shot from Perron. But even with 2 power play chances, the Wings would only end up finding their first goal from Kane with 1.1 seconds left in the game. Too little, too late, and the Wings would lose one of the most important games they've played this season by a goal. This was with the Wings sending 43 shots Lindgren's way, but he had the Wings number this game. This now meant that Washington held the second wild card. Pittsburgh also managed to get an overtime loss the day before as well, so they were now tied with Detroit for points. On the plus side, Philadelphia got decimated by Montreal 9-3, but that also meant that Montreal may have been heating up at the end of the season, something the Wings wouldn't want to see given their last 2 games were against them. 2 days later, Detroit would play the team they were now tied with on points, the Pittsburgh Penguins. This would also be a game where they faced their previous goaltender, Alex Nedeljkovic. If the previous game the Wings played was a careful and calculated affair, this game was an absolute bloodbath of teams frantically trying to one-up each other. Pittsburgh wasted no time in getting things started, with a goal from O'Connor 2:40 in. Detroit would respond less than a minute later, a goal from Raymond to tie the game up. Both teams would settle in with a penalty and another goal each to wrap up the first period 2-2. With the Red Wings taking momentum into the locker room as they got their goal with 13 seconds left. Maybe not the cleanest period for both teams, but enough to make sure they both had a chance going into the second. Pittsburgh would find a way to pull away with the lead, finding goals from Crosby and Rust, but Detroit would continue to be a thorn with a late last-minute goal in the period to cut the lead to 1 after the second period. And the third period would allow the Wings an early power play after Zohorna got called for hooking. A chance to tie the game up on the power play on...
He's got the puck short-handed. Carlo scores!
Oh, good! Just like that, the 2-goal lead returns on a shorthanded goal by Carter. 5 goals in 47 minutes of hockey in a must-win game. This was really starting to feel like last year. Looking like you were maybe not a lock, but in a very good position to make the playoffs. And then things fall apart completely. Yeah, the Wings had gotten a win against Tampa and Buffalo a few games before, but it looked like the slump would continue and playoffs wouldn't be in the cards yet again. Anyways, back to this game. A great pass from Raymond allows Larkin to get one back with 7 minutes left. Maybe they can come back here?
Same thing. There's Larkin all alone as Raymond, he scores! Hat-trick goal, Lucas Raymond, we're tied.
The dream isn't dead yet. Raymond finds the back of the net with 5:07 left in the third to tie the game up 5-5. Even though the Red Wings really needed a regulation win here, the game simply going to overtime would help a lot given where we were at a few minutes ago. The Wings had a chance right at the end of the period to find a goal, but wouldn't be able to, and the game would go to overtime. The Wings would get a few chances in overtime to find the game winner, but 100 seconds into the overtime period, Carlson would blast a puck past Lyon, ending the game 6-5. 2 points for the Penguins, 1 point for the Wings. At least it's not 0. The same day, Philadelphia would win against the Rangers, but Washington would lose against Buffalo. Standings now look like this. Pittsburgh in the second wild card, and Washington, Philadelphia, and Detroit all tied 1 point behind. Each of these teams, except Philly, had 3 games left. Philly has 2. So now, Pittsburgh can win out, and everyone needs the Penguins to lose somewhere. Philadelphia was especially hurting since they could only earn 4 more points. The 2 games that were considered by most must-wins for the Wings were now losses. At this point, every game is a must-win. They cannot afford to lose another game. Otherwise, they probably fall out of contention for the final wild card. Let's also bring up the tiebreaker situation again. We have 3 teams tied in points, so how does that work? The Flyers had played more games, so they immediately go down below the Capitals and Wings, but since everything is so close, let's bring up the regulation wins and regulation overtime wins that we discussed before. Let's also pretend that Philly has the same number of games for a second, just in case things do shake out and all 3 teams are tied. For regulation wins, Detroit has 27, Philadelphia has 29, and Washington also has 29. So Detroit is obviously below Philly and the Caps there, but where do they go? The Flyers have 33 regulation wins, the Capitals have 33. We need our tiebreaker. Time to bust out the rule book again. The number of overall wins. Okay, they are also tied there. We're getting into the weeds. The fifth tiebreaker is the greater number of points earned in games against each other among two or more tied clubs. You know what, we could go through this. For the record, Washington wins that tiebreaker, but this is all hypothetical anyways. The Capitals have 3 games remaining, the Flyers have 2. That's our order. Is there enough numbers in your head yet? Let's get back to the Red Wings. Their next opponent was Toronto, a tough matchup given their record, and Matthews was at 68 goals this season, shooting for 70. Plus, it was in Scotiabank Arena, which was always packed and loud. The Wings couldn't afford even an overtime loss. They needed a win here. The game didn't start super well for the Wings, with Leno getting a boarding call, luckily for Detroit it wasn't a major, and Marner finding a goal on the ensuing power play. As a response, the Wings woke up and ended up finding 4 goals in the second half of the first period, including a nifty play and goal from Edvinsson. Perron would find 1 and DeBrincat would get 2 to make the game 4-1 going into the locker room. The second period started well, but then Toronto would get new life as they ended up finding the back of the net twice in a minute and a half near the middle of the game. Then, with a few minutes left in the period, found another one to tie the game up 4-4. The Wings went from commanding lead to hanging on to a tie game after 1 period, and all of a sudden the third period has the chance to end the Wings' hopes at the playoffs. They had to win this period. Both teams would get plenty of chances this period, including a power play for Toronto late. Nothing came of the chances though, and the period would end up as it started, 4-4. Going into overtime, and for the Wings, that meant they can no longer get a regulation win this game. It's a bit of a slip in the playoff race simply because it hurts the tiebreaker situation if it comes to that. But just get more points, right? They got 1, and another one was on the table. The Wings actually had a decent chance to start the overtime too. Max Domi was called for tripping with 10 seconds left in the third period, so all of a sudden the Wings would be on a 4v3 power play for overtime.
Cleared away by Brody, taken by Gostisbehere.
They want it on the stick of DeBrincat for the shot, if they can get it.
DeBrincat with 2 goals. They score! Dylan Larkin! Dylan Larkin has scored! The Red Wings win it 5-4! Huge 2 points! And
Detroit would stay alive. A Larkin power play goal would end the game 5-4 in overtime, with 2 huge points in the playoff race. After 2 losses in this critical part of the season, a win was exactly what they needed to keep pace. Pittsburgh also lost their game against Boston, which meant that the second wild card was now a 3-way tie in points between Detroit, Philadelphia, and Washington. The tiebreaker picture here doesn't change though. Detroit didn't have enough regulation wins, and Philadelphia still has less games to play than Washington. The only team that really moved here was the Penguins. Now that we've got 2 games left, let's start to formulate the possible scenarios. Let's assume the Red Wings will win their last 2 games against Montreal. What happens? That would leave Detroit with 91 points. Assuming Washington wins both of their games as well, they also have 91 points, leaving Detroit out. So what are the things that can happen to change that? Philadelphia doesn't really have much of a chance now, as they could only earn 89 points. They'd have to rely on Washington getting only 1 point, Detroit losing one of their games, plus some tiebreaker shenanigans. Pittsburgh was also still technically in this, but would need all of these teams to lose at least 1 game here. Next game, Montreal at home. This was the last home game of the season. In years past, all of the fans that filed into Little Caesars Arena that night knew that this would signify the last time they'd see the team on the ice that year. It was very different this year though. There were significant chances we'd see the Wings make their way on the ice in Game 3 of the first round, so much so that the box office was already selling tickets. And just like last game, the fans were in for a thriller. The game started off, just like the last few games for the Wings, with a bit of chaos. Montreal would find Twine before the 5-minute mark of the game, and would fan the fire after picking up a second goal just under 2 minutes later. Detroit would cut the lead in half a few minutes after that, but the Wings were making it a habit to play from behind. This was only exacerbated when Montreal would get 2 more goals in the second period, making the score 4-1 Montreal with less than 5 minutes to play in the second. Keep in mind, this is Montreal. The team held the last spot in the Atlantic right now. 4-1 with 4:34 left in the second. Lyon in particular was having a rough game, with the 4 goals being scored on only 13 shots. Not to say that the defense could have done better in front of him, but the Wings would need to score 3 straight to keep the playoff hopes alive. They'd start pretty quickly by finding a goal 33 seconds after Montreal went up by 3, and would take that goal into the locker room. 4-2 Canadiens, 20 minutes left to play, the season on the line. The first 10 minutes went by in the final stanza with some chances, but no luck on breaking the 2-goal lead. After there being a bit of a mix-up after a whistle with 10:35 to play. If you're a Red Wings fan, I presume you're familiar with throwing octopus on the ice. For the non-hockey fans out there that are for some reason watching this video, you probably think we're all a bit insane right now. And you'd be right! Have you seen what we've put up with so far? 2 octopi would be thrown onto the ice during that break, and whether this invigorated the team, if it was divine intervention, or if it was just sheer coincidence, DeBrincat would find a goal about a minute later. To quote Ken Daniels that night,
There is life in the building.
the team was 1 goal away from sending this game to overtime and getting a chance to keep their playoff dreams alive, just like last game. I hope you don't have blood pressure issues when you're watching this team. The Wings wouldn't be able to find another goal quickly, and as time winded down, we find ourselves in the last 2 minutes of the game. With Lyon pulled for the extra attacker and pandemonium on the goal line as Detroit looks for the equalizer, Detroit would struggle to find the back of the net. A blast from Gostisbehere would ring the iron, Raymond wouldn't be able to find anyone in the slot, and as Montreal looked to clear the puck, Gostisbehere would put on the moon shoes to keep the puck in the zone. How did he keep that in? Perron, Larkin, Gostisbehere, Perron, and after an exhausting 1-minute onslaught in the offensive zone, Raymond gets the puck and finds the corner of the net to tie the game up. 4-4, the playoff dreams are alive, again, for the 5th or 6th time. With 1:17 left in regulation, Montreal would make one final push to see if they could play spoiler. But the period would end, all tied up at 4-4. We're going to overtime again.
Listen to this crowd. Don't they know it?
Look at that bench. They're going crazy.
Remember in the first part when I said that this was a fun season? I wasn't kidding. This is what you live for as a sports fan. The excitement and elation of this moment. Don't forget this feeling for a while, Red Wings fans. There's more on the way, I'm sure of it. With the building loud and the team energized, we enter the overtime period. Let's throw everything out in regards of different types of wins. Just get another point here. Both teams would see chances, Gostisbehere would hit the post again, and we go back and forth in a heart-pounding 4 minutes of overtime. After Lyon would make a save, the puck would bounce out in front of Raymond and he would move it up the ice to Larkin, who would rush it into the zone. Raymond would make his way up on Larkin's side and would fire the puck past the keeper to put the Wings in the win column, getting 2 points in the 11th hour again. Conveniently, this also caused the LCA to lose its roof after a thriller of a game that would be the last regular season game of 2023-24 season in Detroit. This was a fun night in LCA, folks. I promise this isn't a sponsorship for Wings tickets or anything. If you're in the Detroit area, go find a time to get in there at some point. It's worth it.
You could not make this up.
And just like that, we reached the end of the regular season. Game 82, and this game, among one other, would determine the fate of 4 teams: Detroit, Philadelphia, Washington, and Pittsburgh. Let's break it down. We have a bit of a strange situation here. For the Wings, they need to win, that much is obvious. They also need Washington to lose, also obvious, but let's consider the different angles here. If either Detroit or Washington gets 1 point, Philadelphia's out. They can't earn 3 points anymore, their max is 89. So for Detroit, this means they must win and Washington must lose in any fashion, or they must get 1 point and Washington must get 0 points. For Washington, it's much of the same. They must win, and Detroit must lose in any fashion, or they must get 1 point, and Detroit must get as many as 1 point. Remember, Washington still holds the tiebreaker in between them and Detroit, so if they tie on points, they're still in. The Flyers need a much more specific scenario. Because they're 2 points behind, they must have both of these situations happen. They must win in regulation, and Detroit must lose in regulation. Anything else, and Philadelphia's out. This means that if the game they're playing goes to overtime, if Detroit versus Montreal goes into overtime, anything like that, the Flyers are eliminated from the race. Pittsburgh wasn't out of this mess either, although they would need the stars to align if they were going to make it. Pittsburgh would need Detroit to lose in regulation, and the Washington-Philadelphia game to go to Philly. That one matters a bit less on whether it's in regulation or overtime, but the Penguins don't play until tomorrow. They'll be able to watch what happens to know whether their game matters or not. So, 2 games to potentially decide the fate of 4 NHL teams. Let's get underway. Alright, you know the drill by this point. The same as the last game, where the game is starting with chaos. Montreal would get a great chance early in the game, which they couldn't turn into the game's first goal, and Copper would end up getting clipped by a skate early on that would send him to the dressing room for repairs. Yeesh, can we not have more close calls with injuries, please? Detroit would start to find their game and get some chances of their own, but halfway through the period, Montreal would find a 2-on-1 going the other way that resulted in the game's first goal. Detroit would give up the first goal of the game in what seemed like a common theme now. The first period would end up tied though, with Seider sending a blast into the net with 91 seconds remaining in the first period, after Larkin collected the puck on a bad breakout from Montreal. Let's look at the other game real quick. Not a good sign. Come on, Philly, we need you to get this here. The Wings need to win their own game though, and they'd let it get out of their hands during the second period. 2 second period goals would result in a 3-1 lead for Montreal, although the Wings would stop the bleeding and find a goal 36 seconds later, after a bit of a freak incident with Veleno getting the easiest 5-hole goal he'll ever get. Detroit would get into some penalty trouble here afterwards, but after being bailed out by Reimer during the kill, the period would end with the score 3-2 Canadiens. The Wings were going into the final period down 1. Detroit's done this plenty of times at this point, and even though you generally don't want to be losing, at least the Wings had shown they could get results even when they were down going into the third. In the other game we had... Wait a second, this game is tied. Wait a second, there's a chance the Flyers could win. Alright Detroit, it's time to be fans of Gritty for at least 1 period. Let's go! Early on in the third period, Sprong would find another weird goal for the Wings, tying the game 3-3. The Wings were now a goal and some away from making the postseason for the first time in 8 seasons. But, just as it seemed like the Wings were so close, Montreal would find the go-ahead goal on a tip-in. And just like that, Detroit is losing again. It seemed like the luck was running out. I mean, how many more weird goals can you get? Plus, the Washington-Philly game was still tied too. The Wings would pull the goalie with about 2 minutes left, and needed to find a way to tie the game. There'd be a few chances, but with 10 seconds left, Montreal would dump the puck and icing would be called. 7.7 seconds left for the Wings to save their season.
Scrambled face-off, comes back, quick shot. Scores! 3.3. David Perron! It's a tie game! David Perron has tied it up! Wow!
This team wouldn't quit. The Red Wings, in the dying seconds, would tie the game at 4-4. They would be guaranteed to get 1 point. The Caps-Flyers game was still tied too. Washington might still lose. A single point might do it. But remember what Philly needed to get in. With the game tied 1-1, They needed to win in regulation. But that didn't matter anymore. Detroit got at least 1 point, which meant Philadelphia was now out. However, that wasn't known on the Flyers bench. So the Flyers pull their goalie in a 1-to-1 contest to try to find the go-ahead goal in regulation. While the Wings were still playing for a win in Montreal, Washington would find the empty net with 3 minutes left in their game, which, if the results held, would knock Detroit out. The Wings still had to play hard, though. If Philly were to tie the game up, and they would certainly try as they would pull the goalie again, and somehow win in regulation, then Detroit would still make it in. Overtime would see Larkin get a breakaway chance that he couldn't finish, Kane would get called for tripping, and after an intense 5 minutes, would result in 0 goals. We go to a shootout, but it didn't matter. Washington would hold the 1-goal lead that they got off the empty net goal, and their game ended 2-1. Washington wins. They get the final spot. The first 5 shooters would not find a goal, and Kane would find the first and only goal of the shootout to win the game 5-4. There wasn't any happiness, though, and you could see based on the reaction of the players. All of the energy in the last few weeks, completely gone. The Red Wings would miss the playoffs. John Tortorella, the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, would say this in his post-game interview.
The goalie pull, were you getting info about the status of the Detroit game, or were you solely focused on this one?
I got info on the Detroit game right after they scored their empty netter. I think it happened pretty close together. But I was pulling them. I'm pulling them, and that was the right time to pull them. Didn't know anything was going on with Detroit at that time, but immediately after that, our video guys told us that Detroit just went to overtime.
And if you line up both games side by side, yeah, it's really close. But it's hard to shake the feeling that the Wings had done what they needed to do. They would end up with the same number of points as the second wildcard holder. And yet, they wouldn't make it into the postseason. To wrap up the standings conversation, Washington would make it, Detroit would be the first team out, and this game also eliminated Pittsburgh, since they could only get 90 points total. For what it's worth, Washington would get swept in the first round by the Rangers. That didn't make missing the playoffs hurt any less, though, knowing that Detroit wouldn't even get the chance. It was also contract years for Raymond and Seider. Husso was still a huge question mark, and there were questions as to what prospects would slot in. While this team was clearly continuing to make positive strides, there were some really big questions on how the team would look next year, knowing that the cap would be considerably tighter. We obviously know in hindsight what the results are, considering Raymond and Seider are now signed, but let's think back at what it was like at the end of the season. As I said at the beginning of all of this, though, despite the whiplash of emotions of the past few weeks that ultimately ended in disappointment, this was such a fun season. Things could be better, of course. They could have won the cup. That'd probably be the season to just not complain at all. But looking back at it a few days after the loss, it was still pretty rewarding to see the team get that close. If anything, it showed not just the hockey world, but the Wings themselves, that their playoff window was opening, and a bit more consistency would result in Detroit returning to the playoffs. Oh my gosh, it's finally over. Wow, this video took longer than I was thinking it was going to edit. First and foremost, thank you for watching. I'm gonna give you, like I've always kind of done here at the end of the video, just kind of give you an update of where things are, and also kind of talk about the Wings a little bit as they are right now, because, I mean, hey, we're halfway through the, well, not quite, but about halfway through the season at this point. So it is a little interesting to take a look at, especially the last couple games and how good things were. And I mean, I don't know about anyone else. I still, despite how rough things were, like, don't get me wrong, things kind of sucked not making the playoffs last year, but it was still a lot of fun. And even watching this video, I was like, going through and editing it. Obviously, it hurts, right? But I don't know. It's still kind of fun. So it's obviously the season has not quite gone the way that we would have liked it to go so far. Clearly, there's something that's working in the last couple of games here with Fireland and bringing in McClellan. Team's playing way better. Whether that means the team is substantially better, who knows, right? I'm recording this on January 5th, and as of today, the Wings are only 2 points out of a playoff spot. Tell me where you've heard that before. But I don't know. Who knows what could happen? So at this point, I think I'm just rambling. There's going to be a couple things coming out here, probably. My goal of 2025 is to be releasing videos every couple of months, basically. Maybe get something that's on a schedule, like, release it every Sunday or maybe some weekday or something like that, so that it's a little more predictable. And just going from there. But yeah, thanks for watching. As always, it's a ton of fun to make this stuff, albeit this time, man, there were a couple things that took me a while to get through. If you can't tell, the script was written long before, the audio was recorded back when I released part 1, which was back in October. So the script, the audio, all that stuff is very much outside of what we would have seen already in this season. But yeah, thanks for watching. Ton of fun doing this, as always. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like what you see here, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.